Okay, we might get underway. First of all, I'd like everyone to give each other a clap for turning up on this freezing cold night and not sort of saying we'll stay at home and listen online. It's so great to see you and great to see so many people here. First of all, I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the country throughout Australia, wherever you may be, and their continuing connection to culture, community, land, sea and sky. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And I think that as we look into a slightly more positive future where the Uluru Statement of the Heart is about to be acknowledged and taken forward, and where the incredible depth of knowledge and understanding of how to live carefully in this place, what I'd love you to do is just close your eyes for a minute and think about a special place in nature and just kind of breathe into and feel into what it sounds like, what it feels like, what it smells like, what you're hearing and what you're smelling, and just think deeply about that, because this is what we are here about. We are here about finding all the power and the agency that we have to protect these deep places as our custodians have done before. And we all have agency to do that, and it's now that we need to step into that and really take action. We've got the wind behind our sails as opposed to sailing into headwinds, and there's amazing things that we can all achieve now. But tonight we are talking about sustainability action plans, and I'm stepping in for Paul Reidy, who should be here, but he is a late cancellation due to being tested positive for COVID, which is a real pity, because he is the person in the Architects Declare movement in New South Wales who, with Rosie Adams-Schuminger, led the task group that developed a template for the action plans to happen, and a number of people took them on last year. And this year, Australian Architects Declare are really making it a priority to help everyone get together and get these action plans in place and start really getting involved in what we need to do to change things in this country and in this world. So first up tonight, we're going to have two practices sharing what they are doing. And first of all, we've got Valerie Saavedra from BVN, and then we've got Liz Westgarth from Hassell, and then Claire Bowles from I2C will be joining the panel as we discuss what this all means and how we might take it forward. So firstly, Valerie's going to present. Valerie's a firm believer that the built environment can be a catalyst to regenerate the planet if approached in the right way. As a regenerative practice lead at BVN Architects, she is co-developing the overall vision, strategy and structure for regenerative practice to align with BVN's core purpose and vision to be smarter, more creative and better for the planet. Throughout her career, she has collaborated on several award-winning architectural projects and was the recipient of the Royal Institute of British Architects Paul Davis Award and a bronze medal commendation for her framework for social, environmental and economic sustainability for informal settlements in India. She holds a Bachelor of Architecture from London Metropolitan University, a Master's in Architecture, Urbanism and Building Sciences from TU Delft, is a qualified regenerative practitioner as well as Living Future Institute and Green Star accredited professional. How did you do it all, Valerie? Now, welcome and come. Way too long. No, welcome. You're a very fabulous person. Come and talk to us about regenerative pathways.
Hello, welcome everyone.
Hello. Oh, that's a bit too much. Thanks so much for braving it here in person on such a cold day, and welcome everyone online. So today, I'd like to talk about our pathways to a regenerative future. It's not per se the whole sustainability action plan, but a point in time of where we're at. So first of all, I'd like to acknowledge the First Nations of, sorry, this microphone is a bit weird. The First Nations of the countries where we meet today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders, lords, customs, and creation spirits. And I really do hope that we learn from them how to be good ancestors. For those of you that don't know about BVN, this is us. We're a practice of 350 people across Sydney, Brisbane, London, and New York. And we are now a climate positive organization, and we're committed to innovating our ways towards a regenerative future. And that's a future that maximizes human well-being, binds us through place, and regenerates the planet. As many of you, one of our first actions was to get our house in order. So we became climate positive in operations early last year. And even before architects declared, we were doing lots of work on sustainability, but actually signing the declaration really put a point in the sand to really accelerate this. And as you know, like the impact that we have as offices, our office operations is really very little compared to what projects impact has. So this is just a description from Howard Tompkins, what the office operations impact is compared to just the embodied carbon of one large project. And that's just one project. We have about, 80 live projects in the practice. So in terms of what our different action points are to improve our projects, we've got three main pillars. Education, which is all about building capability in regenerative design. Then design, how to implement regenerative design into projects, and advocacy, which is about advancing our industry towards a regenerative future. So let's just start with education, which is about building capability in regenerative design. And the first step to do that is really truly understanding what the principles of regenerative design and development are and how to achieve them. So I think this slide always makes it very clear to everyone where we're needing to head towards and where we're at today. So if everyone lived like we lived in Australia today, we would need about 4.1 planets to sustain us. And worldwide, that's 1.75 planets. And if we compare that to a business as usual office building designed to BCA, that would be 3.5 planets. Even if we look at like Green Star 6 buildings, the previous Green Star 6, that would be just a less bad impact on the planet. So we really, to regenerate and sustain us, we really need to move towards the regenerative spectrum where we're generating much more than is required and we're creating conditions for society and environment to thrive. So really it's about catalyzing systemic transformations. It's big change that needs to happen. To do this, we developed a framework that looks at different elements, and I'm going to talk about each one of these. So very first step is about truly understanding what is actually the root cause of this massive imbalance that we have in the planet. And this quote by Krishna du Plessis highlights this really well for me. The problems of climate change, biodiversity loss, and dysfunctional ecosystem services are not the real problem, but merely the symptoms. The real problem lies in us not changing our worldviews and value systems that created the problem. So this all starts with, how do we need to change our worldview? How do we need to start thinking about the world? Starts with a whole rethink of our economic model. Truly understanding that we depend on a healthy environment and society to have a healthy economy. And also, stop thinking as us at the top of the pyramid, as dominating nature, but actually as one part of nature. And that whatever we do to nature, we're actually doing to ourselves. then in terms of the design process, it starts from a truly understanding of place. And with that, I mean not just really looking at the site analysis the way we usually do, but trying to understand the scale in which the project can actually have an influence. So that could be the city, the watershed of the bioregion, so looking beyond the actual site boundaries. Then also looking at how the place works and what's working for life in that place. And also understanding what makes that place unique. What do people think about that? We now just do all the desktop research. We never go and actually talk to people and try and find out what do they like about that place. And the other part of the design process is, moving from the traditional design process to a more integrated system where we look at things holistically. So rather than looking at all the elements in isolation and the engineer does their thing, the architect does one thing, the landscape architect does something else, we really bring everyone on board very early. And we work on the continuous optimization of whole systems at different scales. And then it's part of our framework is as well different categories like water, ecology, energy, resources, wellness, community and resilience. And it could be others, and they could be named differently. And the idea is when we look at these, we're really trying to work towards the health of people and ecosystems. We're really not just trying to do less bad, but move as much as we can towards the regenerative spectrum. And in terms of the regenerative outcomes, what does it mean to actually deliver a regenerative project? When do we know that that has been successful? We will have net positive impacts, which means we, whenever possible, create net positive energy and water. We have carbon sequestering materials whenever possible. We leave a happier community, and also we leave the ecosystem in a better state than it was before we actually started the project. Then in terms of cyclic closed loops, it's all about ensuring that nothing goes to waste. So material is a resource. We work with the circular economy principles. And also in terms of water, we don't waste water. Everything stays in the system. And the third aspect, which is really important for a regenerative project, is that we have continuous evolution through stakeholder engagement. What that means is that our projects become catalysts for regeneration. So other than the actual building being the most, amazing, net positive in water, in energy, and everything, through the process of designing this building, you're empowering everyone that's engaged in the project to make a difference in their lives, whatever it is. If they work in hospitals, they then might go and start a sustainability action plan for their hospital. If they're teachers, they might do something else, but it's about seeing our opportunity as architects to touch the lives of everyone involved in the project to actually make a change, because only doing the projects that we're doing the best way we can, it's not going to get us to where we need to go. It has to be a really accelerated process, and it's about engaging everyone. And then how we are planning to actually get the practice involved with all of this, with develop an education program, which is educating our staff about the basic principles, which means why does this matter, and how do we design for it. Then there will be deeper dives and workshops. Also having internal project case studies where we show where this has been successful, so we learn from our actual projects, and then we're also inviting external speakers. For each one of the elements of our framework, we have guides to help us with what we need to do, including some elements that just discuss if you can only do a few things on this project, what should you do? What are the best practices? What are recommended metrics for this category? And how can I engage the client doing this work? also been developing different low-embodied material specification guides and updating our materials library to showcase healthy, sustainable materials. The idea is that we are trying to make it as easy as possible to make the right choice. So let's not put any materials that are bad, let's just take them out completely. And then when we go to design projects, it's about implementing these principles into projects. Similar to what we did with the office operations, the first step was to understand the impact of all of our live projects. So we did a very high level review of all the projects to understand how are we actually doing in this degenerative to regenerative spectrum. And we found out that, yeah, we do have a few great projects that are doing great things, but there's others that are not doing as great as we would like them to. So it's really going down deep to understand, and I would suggest you do that as well with the project typologies that you have in your office. Really try to understand what are the main challenges, barriers, and opportunities for each one of these, and how can we overcome these. And also talk to your staff to understand, what are the challenges that they're encountering. So we did a survey of all the project leaders in the practice to really understand why, if we had this great ambitions, why did it not come to fruition? And also trying to understand what they think is required to adopt more sustainable principles and what can we do to accelerate sustainable design in projects. Where we're at currently is we're doing a deeper dive. We're calculating the ecological footprint for each major project typology we work on. So trying to understand quantitatively what the human demand versus the supply of nature will be on our projects. So we're not just looking at carbon, but also biocapacity, infrastructure, water, transport, apart from embodied carbon and operational carbon, obviously. And the third step in this project is to actually look at how we can improve it. So what are cost-neutral options that we can adopt so that it's not cost that always deters us from improving our projects, and also looking at what would an exemplar of regenerative design look like for each of these project typologies. We're also developing with the footprint company a framework to zero that would help us structure the different steps that we need to achieve to get to net zero. One of our main focus areas at the moment is embodied carbon. So these are some steps that we're looking at to reduce embodied carbon on all projects. So education, then establishing the embodied carbon baseline and target, applying the strategies to achieve low carbon design, actually calculating it on projects, and then tracking results and report, and sort of the same we've been doing with operating energy. And as things progress, we'll be looking at water and everything else. And another big focus area is designing with country, and for quite some time we have been going through a thorough designing with country methodology in all of our projects, no matter how big or small, to really understand the indigenous layer, the First Nations layer, and this goes into, going back to the regenerative framework, it's the thorough understanding of place. In terms of design reviews, you probably do technical reviews, then we do design reviews, but it's really important that we also put, sustainability as part of the review process too. And this is, a very busy slide, but it just talks about the process that we need to engage with. So it starts with the bid, or before the bid really, with your go and no-go process, like really try and filter which projects you accept for your company and we accept for our company. And then wherever possible, we are engaging in the pre-briefing meeting with the client to embed sustainability principles in the project before even the project is a project. And then another key step is at the beginning of the project, when we are putting together the guiding principles and purpose for the project. And then there's different sort of regenerative design reviews that will happen. And then the third big pillar is advocacy, which is about advancing our industry towards a regenerative future. And I mean, as you know, there are things that we can control, which is mainly, you know, our projects and the cost-neutral options. But there's others that we can influence, and we should do whatever we can to improve those. So we've been involved with different external advocacy campaigns, like the campaign for zero emission homes and the CEP and others. And it's also important to engage our clients to help them understand how they could do better, but this is a big scale. Like, for example, how do you start doing that with, you know, Queensland government, Queensland Health, and really just looking at power structures and how to make change at this scale. So just to summarize, we need to create systemic change at scale and really fast. And if you haven't read Donella Meadows' Leverage Points to Intervene in a System, I would highly recommend you have a look, because it's a great article that just shows like what does actually make the biggest impact when we want to create systemic change. And it is the mindset, it is the worldview. So once that is in place, the rest will come really easy. If I translate that to our teams and projects, it's really about the mindset of the client, of the entire team, and the will. Once we've developed the will in the client to want to make a contribution and a change, and also the whole team, and everyone's engaged and excited to create an amazing project, the rest goes really easily. So we do need, you know, the rest of it, like research guides and tools and softwares and project targets, and all of that is required. But what's going to make the biggest change is developing the will, I think, and the mindset. Similarly, at practice level, yes, you can be saying like, hey, we should be using these resources and these tools and all of that, but unless it's part of the purpose of the company, it's fully embedded in it, it's part of the vision and the culture, it's much slower, I think. And I can talk that from experience. So once, you know, at the moment, our purpose is collective creativity to design a better future, and the idea is that this should guide everything that we do. And yeah, this quote just reiterates that, that unless sustainability and business strategy is synonymous, it does not really take traction. I'd just like to end with a few questions. What if we all could make sure that every design decision would make the world a better place? And what if every single project would give more than it takes? And what if our impact would go well beyond creating buildings to empowering stakeholders to become change makers? I know it's daunting, lots to do, but the secret of getting ahead is getting started. Thank you.
Wow, great to know BVN are so, and I do know that because I've been working closely with Valerie ever since Australian Architects Declare started, and she's been really bringing these ideas to bear in what that work, and then obviously the work she's doing with the practice. So that's absolutely fantastic. And do not be afraid. As she said, you've got to get started, and there's a whole lot of things that we'll talk about after this about what is being put in place to help. So what we're trying to do is inspire and show you that what is possible. Now tonight, we've got Liz Westgarth from Hassell. Liz is an experienced, highly respected architect and principal who's based in Hassell's Sydney studio. During an extensive international career, she has led and designed high-profile projects and integrated precincts spanning the workplace, retail, residential and culture sectors. Some of her work includes Harbourside Redevelopment, the Lands Department Sandstone Precinct, 110 Walker Street Commercial Tower, Waterloo Metro Quarter and the State Library of New South Wales. Liz is known for the clear vision and communication she brings to her work. A member of the New South Wales State Design Review Panel, Liz is passionate about design and the important contributions women make in the field. In addition to serving on the Hassell board and as head of design, she's an active mentor and role model to the next generation of leaders in Hassell's practice. So welcome, Liz.
Can you hear me? Okay, great. Thank you, Caroline, and it was great to see Valerie's presentation because you'll see through my presentation tonight there are actually quite a few similar themes. It's great to be back here at Sydney Uni after quite a long time. I actually studied here, so it's really good to be back and share some work. I'd also like to start tonight by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I thought I'd just start today to just share a little bit more about Hassell for people who don't know us very well. And I think it's really important to start with our vision. You know, our vision is to design places people love, and that's really about driving for a better future. We are a global practice with offices across Australia, the UK, Asia and the US, and I mention that because it's actually really important in the context of sustainability. I mean, clearly climate change is a global issue, but when you are operating in different geographic locations, there are other important considerations such as policy, but also clients. And some areas are more sort of progressive, and that's important to consider. As I mentioned, you know, we do operate across the globe, but we are also a multidisciplinary practice. And so when we are looking at implementing and developing a sustainability action plan, we're also considering how that works across different disciplines, so architecture, landscape architecture, urban design and interior design, as well as across a number of different sectors as well. So I guess I kind of wanted to start tonight and just kind of take a bit of a step back, just to talk a little bit, and Valerie sort of touched on this, you know, as designers, the sort of project work we do is really important. And, you know, this is actually an older project, one that we did 10 years ago now, the Global Change Institute in Queensland. And I think this still is a pretty phenomenal project, actually. It's an exemplar of ecological transformation. It was actually the first carbon neutral public building in Australia. It's also zero energy, zero waste, zero water, and it also showcased some quite interesting innovation, particularly around cement-free geopolymer concrete as well. And then I guess just another one, and this really showcases our landscape architecture, the Millennium Parklands. And again, for those of you who may not be so familiar, this is actually one of the most contaminated sites, I guess, in Sydney. And it's now actually one of Sydney's most loved community parks. We did this through a healing approach, and we re-established the ecology of the place, the natural processes in the sort of estuarine environment there. But, and I say but, because, you know, doing some great work isn't enough, and I don't really need to, I guess, go through, you know, this slide, because I think everyone is very well across it. But, you know, the built environment does contribute 40% of the world's carbon footprint, and also a huge construction demolition waste, you know, up over 35%. And I really like this quote from Elizabeth Stamp that says, you know, in the field of architecture, we actually face a monumental opportunity, and some might argue an immense responsibility. So with that in mind, you know, a couple of years ago now at Hassell, we really realised we were sort of at crossroads, and we wanted to take some fantastic initiatives that we already had in place and started to look forward to develop, I guess, our next evolution of a sustainability action plan that would really look to take us forward for the next 10 years. So what I want to do is take you through a few slides and just share some of that process with you. So we started off by developing an approach, and similar to what Valerie talked about, for us it was really important that we engage with the practice and we defined a collective aspiration. We also wanted to understand the current state of play, identify very clear priority areas. Whilst we would like to do it all, we knew we couldn't do it all, at least immediately. And also look into opportunities for us to really kind of push and take some leadership, and then pull this together in a very clear kind of framework that would guide all of our people over the next number of years. So a really important part of that was engaging with our people, and we did an all-of-staff survey, and we had some pretty great and very interesting results from that. As you can see from this slide, we had a very high response rate. We had over 70% of people respond to the survey, and that was across all levels and in all locations as well, and across all sectors. So that was really valuable. And the interesting thing out of that was that there was collectively a very high level of ambition at Hassell. Over 85% of our people wanted to take some leadership in this space. And that was actually reinforced by a client survey that we did, where clients felt that architects, and in particular Hassell, were well positioned also to take some leadership in the space. So I guess our next step in the process was undertaking a series of workshops, and we actually did a number of these across kind of many different forums, and this slide maps out some of that process. But we took a deeper dive. We wanted to understand what some of those gaps and barriers were, how we deal with some challenging or tricky questions. And we also wanted to do a design focus session where we really understood the comfort and expertise of our people, again looking at where some of the barriers and gaps were. So I don't expect you to read this slide, but some of the kind of findings from that really started to emerge. You know, our staff, for example, they really wanted some more training. They wanted case studies. They wanted to build knowledge and experience. They wanted more guidance. to be guidance that was very particular and unique to the area in which they're operating, so unique to the sort of sector or discipline in which they're in. That probably takes me quite nicely then to projects and clients, because I think they link very strongly. Again, tools and techniques and how we really discuss, promote, advocate in a very compelling and convincing way with some of the themes that started to come out. Leadership was another big topic, a desire for a leadership team that very much inspires and advocates. And then, this probably all comes together with culture, because there was an acknowledgement that sustainability really needed to be embedded in our culture across everything we do, how we operate, but also our projects. How that links into, things such as our design process, but other things such as our go, no-go when we decide to do a project or not. So these are some of the themes that came out, or the key values and behaviours that were very clear to us from that engagement process. Our people really wanted us to take a leading position. It was to be embedded, inspiring, innovative, but also very, very much linked to us being a creative organisation as well. I think for so long, engineers have taken a lot of leadership in this space, and so, for us as architects, in a very creative way, to address that was certainly something that came out. And that links quite nicely into a set of commitments that we developed at Hassell that talk to that collective ambition. And there's some pretty big commitments here that we've developed. And I'll just sort of point out a few. All of our building projects to be net zero by 2030. And that's through immediately implementing design strategies to reduce operational and embodied carbon on every project. So we're very particular about some wording there, that it was to be immediate, that it was up to everyone in the practice to take some ownership and responsibility. It wasn't up to someone else. Because if we are to get to that collective ambition by 2030, it's down to everyone driving it forward. There is some other ones there, net zero carbon in our own studio operations by 2023, and that will include the reduction of energy, water use, waste and other carbon emissions. We were also really keen to look at social value generation in a lot more detail, and we know that's a very complex area. So what we set out here is to start measuring and monitoring and reporting on that by the end of 2023, just to give ourselves a little bit more time to investigate that further and what would be appropriate for us. And then 100% renewable electricity in all of our studios by the end of 2021. So we fleshed this out into some strategic targets, and I guess all I want to do is point out on this slide is that we set these into kind of three key areas. The first one around really the work that we do, so what we create, and that sort of touches on our buildings, our interiors and our urban design landscape work. How we embed it in what we do, so that covers off studio operations, but also how we share knowledge and build skills and expertise. And then lastly, how we collaborate and innovate and engage externally as well. So again, not for people to particularly read, but set ourselves some sort of interim targets around some of those focus areas. we felt it was really important for us to set very clear and measurable targets if we're to hold ourselves accountable. So that's what was intended here. And then this slide is really important. This was actually one of our key outcomes for a sustainable design framework. It's really been tailored very specifically for Hassell. And so what you can see in the outer ring is what came out of that engagement process, and that captures the behaviours and values that our people wanted to see. And that's around being creative, industry leading, embedded, inspiring and innovative. And then what you can see then on the next rings on the inside is how we've combined our operational sustainability measures with our design strategies to really have a holistic sustainability kind of vision. And then in the middle, what you can see is 12 principles, and they extend beyond some of the more conventional principles that you may see in other frameworks, such as sort of energy, water, and materials. And they move into other spaces which we call sustainable places, and that's really starting to address some of the scale and complexity of the work we do, particularly around landscape architecture and urban design. Social responsibility is the other one, and that starts to reflect on our vision that I discussed at the beginning around places that people love, our diversity and inclusion, but also our emerging environment and community sector. And then lastly, in the top left there, the whole of life thinking. So encompassing our strategy, we have a research and strategy team, our resilience planning, post-occupancy learning, essentially the strategic insights that we have that link very strongly to our creative design process. So these principles then we elaborated on in a little bit more detail, and these will be fleshed out for our staff, but essentially these provide some guidance for the staff on how to start to think about all of these principles in the work that we do. So what's been achieved so far? Because as I mentioned, for us it's been sort of 18 months to 2 years, and we have achieved a few things which we're very proud of actually. So I guess the first one was we hit our first kind of target around achieving 100% renewable energy in our studios, and we did that last year. We have also developed a reconciliation action plan, and that is intentionally done to link into our sustainability framework. Again, I think there's a few things there just to touch on, how we deepen our relationship and understanding and build respect for First Nations people, and build opportunities for social and economic outcomes really links back to our framework. But also how we, and I guess Valerie touched on this really nicely as well, how we learn from the mindset of First Nations people, that the importance of being custodians, care for country, and thinking about future generations, again, sort of links really quite strongly back to some of those principles in our framework. As well as our diversity and inclusion framework, we have also recently completed this, and initially, whilst it is diversity and inclusion in the broader sense, we've done a deeper dive on gender. Again, really looking at how we advocate, improve awareness, and also support that with policy, because inclusion is one of our core values as well. The other thing that we are doing a lot of and is around training, and that was one of the kind of key themes that emerged. So we have got actually some very active sustainability groups at Hassell, and we're rolling out quite a lot of training in the space, but we're also bringing in external speakers, and we've got a number of Hassell people who are involved in external forums such as MECLA and also ACAN in the UK as well. And so kind of bringing that knowledge back in, but also importantly sharing it out into the industry. Tools is the other thing that we've continued to develop, and these are really important because, you know, we need to measure what we're doing. So you can see here on this slide just some of the tools that we've rolled out across the practice, and measuring, you know, the work that we do right from that very sort of beginning concept through to completion. Some of the analysis tools there, environmental analysis, but also carbon life cycle analysis. I thought it would be useful, because I know there's a lot of sort of architects in the room that enjoy seeing design work, to show you just a couple of projects where we have implemented our sustainable design framework and really looking at those 12 principles. And this is one that is, I say a recent one, but we've probably been doing it just under a year now. This is literally the first building in the new Aerotropolis out at Western Sydney. And we designed this in collaboration with Dinjama, a cultural Indigenous advisor. It's actually an advanced manufacturing facility, but we designed it with a whole of life sustainability thinking and flexibility and adaptability in mind. So we designed it as a kit of parts that can be disassembled at the end of the building's life and potentially, you know, reassembled somewhere else in the city as the city evolves and might have different requirements. It is 6-star Green Star, it's Living Building Challenge, it ticks a lot of those boxes as well. But importantly, it also builds in a very strong connection to country narrative. And for those of you who know this part of Western Sydney, the Waitemata, this is Mother's Country, and almost like a female place. So we started to build in sort of a soft and sinuous language through the design, which was very sort of warm and welcoming in the timber sort of pavilion. This project here is also another kind of interesting one in terms of sustainability, where we're exploring recycled plastics as a viable construction material. And that's really with the idea of contributing, you know, to the goal of eliminating plastic waste islands. And then lastly, One Heart Village in Tanzania. This project is one where we're looking to address a pretty big issue in this area, one of gender inequality, you know, where the abuse of power by men and some harmful practices, particularly around physical and sexual abuse. So what we're designing are rescue homes in this area, and they're all self-sufficient and looking at using a lot of sort of local, readily available materials. I'm just going to finish with one more slide, because what's next? Well, actually, the timing is pretty great, because tomorrow we have a head of sustainability starting. And when I talked about, you know, one of the key things that came out of our engagement with the practice was leadership. So we have done a global search and appointed Sam Pert, who's starting tomorrow, and she will really be instrumental in helping us drive where we've got to with the framework, but shaping it as well, for the future. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Does that work? Yeah, thank you so much, Liz. That's fantastic. Now, I'm just really thrilled because more and more people have come into the room, and I'd like to invite Valerie and Claire down. But can I just get some idea of who's here? Like, students? How many students are here? So not that many. Oh, no, all of you are students, aren't you? Yeah. Okay. Put your hands up high. This is a great networking opportunity. You can go and talk to some practitioners later. So who else? Who's from big practices? Okay, and smaller practices. Okay, lots of small practices and academics. Not a lot of academics. That's disappointing, isn't it? Anyway, so I think what we might do is just, we'll start a conversation and we'll have a couple of on-site questions and then we're going to get some questions from everyone. But and I'd like Claire to start, but just before, I'd just like to say the Institute of Architects is actually, and I'm sort of helping, I'm a member of the CAST, the Climate Action Sustainability Task Force, and we're working with the First Nations Working Advisory Group to develop a design excellence framework, which will, and I noticed one of Valerie's slides on how they're putting information was very much inspired by the Architecture 2030 or the Institute of Architects in America Design Excellence Framework, which has kind of got, what it is. There's 10 different categories, and then there's a description, and then there's, a bigger understanding of what it is, and then if you can only do one thing, there's resources, there's case studies, and there's other things to help people go, well, what do I do here? And I think that's the basis of what the framework is going to, we hope, will look like, and we're going to be going out to the chapters and talking about this to make sure, because in case you didn't realise that the AACA last year embedded designing with country and sustainability in the new national framework for how we are judged as architects. So we've got a kind of, it's fantastic because all the stars are lining up and we're all going to have to do this, which is sensational. Now, before we go, Claire. Welcome, Claire, from Melbourne. Now, come and talk to us about your sustainability action plan and what you guys are doing and how that all fits in.
Hi everyone. Oh gosh. Hi everyone. It's still quite loud. Thank you, Caroline, and thank you, Liz and Valerie, for such wonderful presentations. And I'm sorry I didn't do any slides. Hi, I'm Claire Bowles, and I have been privileged to work with I2C Architects for 5 years now. So really, I guess 5 years ago, I2C Architects took the bold step of employing someone who wasn't an architect to come and inspire their teams across Australia to really improve the behaviours, actions, and also on their impacts generally as an organisation and as people with responsibility and citizens. So we've had a sustainability action plan for some time. It started out literally as a group of very enthusiastic people within the admin team. And when I arrived, the first thing we did was get together and have a look at what was already happening in the studios, but then also that process of surveying and understanding what was really important to I2C. And as a result of that, what I learned was actually it was very much around social value, very much around people and diversity and respect across our teams. So we've taken some quite bold, big steps in our sustainability action plan. So last year we had our Carbon Zero studio, which is our Melbourne studio, and by 2023 all of the studios will be carbon neutral. But we worked on our reconciliation action plan, so that was launched last year. So we're about 6 months through that with implementation and our RAP working group. But aside from that, we've also been really heavily engaged on the social side, as I mentioned. So we actually work with our neighbours within our local community in Melbourne to green our environments, but actually look at ways that all of the organisations that are along Cromwell Street, which is where we are in Collingwood, actually, what are we all doing in our own sustainability action plans, and how can we come together to maximise that? Could we be the first electric-only, powered by renewable energy street, for example? So we're looking at sort of that localised level of community actions and the ripple effect that that can have. So heavily involved in Regen Melbourne and a few other initiatives in and around. I feel like I'm stealing the floor, and you should ask me some questions because I'm just kind of rambling. So I'd much rather have a conversation. If anyone wants to ask me about what we're doing at I2C, I would be very, very happy to share.
We might, I mean, rather than me just rabbit on, we might open the floor and see if there are any questions, and if there aren't, I've got a whole bunch. But has anyone, I mean, it must be, I mean, I think it can be quite intimidating if you haven't started your sustainability action plan to just say, well, how do I start this? Where do I go? Is anyone feeling like that? I mean, I do have to say that there is actually a template on the Architects Declare website that Paul Reidy and Rosie and a few others have organised. So that is a starting point. But I think, what would you say, say Liz or Valerie or Claire, what would you do if you didn't have one now and you were starting? Where would you start? What would you do? You go, Claire.
Only because I've got the mic. I would say really try and understand what's truly important to you as an organisation, so as a design firm, and build your priorities from that starting point. So understand what it is about. Sustainability is a huge area, but what is it about your practice that gets your teams excited, that gets you wanting to improve and be more responsible? That would be my starting point. And don't go too big, too quick.
Yeah, no, I do agree. We did that as well. Another thing, if you're kind of have a little sustainability group and don't have any buy-in from the leadership, just try and understand who in the leadership group can be your advocate, because that's really important. Like, you can do a lot of things if you don't have the leadership involved, but unless they're really involved, that's when things really take traction. And as I said before, making it part of the business strategy, that's when it really starts getting faster.
And just on the way through, and maybe if you're a small practice, you could join up with other small practices and do it together.
Probably repeating some of the themes, but I think absolutely it's important to link it to business strategy, identify those key stakeholders within your organisation that can really help advocate and drive, but then importantly, what's important to everyone, because I mean, I think I stepped through the process, that understanding what, you know, is really going to kind of motivate people. So that engagement for us was a really critical first step.
Any other questions from the floor? Yep. Andy.
I'm particularly curious, you're all not small firms, which is fine. I'm interested whether, or to the extent that any of these action plans have influenced the jobs you've said yes to, and especially, Liz, because you've got real targets with numbers.
Yeah.
Is there a point where you're going to basically have to say no because it's just going to kick you off your target? Well, it's all about culture, really. So the point about being large firms is you have a lot of mouths to feed.
Yes.
And you're obviously cognizant of that because you're human. And therefore, how does that all come together? And is the action plan making any big impact on any of those decisions?
Yeah, absolutely it is. This is actually a very big board discussion. What does this mean for us as an organisation? What sectors, what clients, what work do we have to say no to? Interestingly, when you really think about that, it's not clear, it's not black and white. And we know that there's rapid change, you know, in all industries and sectors. So we're also expecting that to evolve. But I guess at the end of the day, we took an approach of, well, it's important to us as an organisation. It's better to almost put the sort of flag on the hill and strive towards that, and then set, things out to do that. And part of that is a really critical go, no-go discussion, which we actually already had embedded at Hassell around sustainability, but we've made even more rigorous.
And what does it do to project budgets? Not the office budgets, but the project budgets.
Yeah, good question. Again, I think that depends on the project and client. I think Valerie touched on that quite nicely. I don't always think it necessarily increased costs. A lot of it is just around smart design, and we know, really good sustainable design. The areas that have the biggest impact are actually the passive design areas, and they don't cost anything. So if you can educate your staff around some of those passive measures, but then also some just really, smart decisions around material choice and other things, that doesn't have to cost anything.
Dematerialising is very cost effective. Now,
Yeah, similar to Liz, we also have a rigorous go, no-go process, and sustainability was part of it, but now it's really a big discussion, what we take on. But it's also not just about, taking the projects that have got high ambitions. It's also about which projects will we be able to influence the client towards better outcomes, and actually having that conversation. Because we do, for example, a lot of health projects, a lot of schools, where the requirements may not be high at all, but it's really what can we do to make them better? And it's not like we're going to stop doing hospitals just because, it's like hospitals still need to be built, but how can we make them better? And it's a long discussion, and it's, there's a lot of workshops that need to happen to get to a better outcome. But yeah, we're starting at least with the case studies now.
Thanks. I think the go, no-go has been a discussion area for us over the recent years. And certainly what we've chosen to do, I think, as an organisation, is actually tried to look to future markets and new markets and areas for us that deliver or help to deliver around social value. So one of the big areas that I've been heading up is new market development into social housing, but also looking at how we can build our build-to-rent portfolio. And really there it's about working with clients where you can get traction and you can have leverage because they're owner-occupiers. So the discussion is a lot easier around sustainability. And certainly, when you think of social housing, the discussions around tenant health and well-being act as a really, really good trigger for us.
it'll be interesting to see whether there'll be more clients looking for more help to achieve zero carbon in a new future where we're actually going to be achieving budgets. And I think actually our industry is so well placed to work with people to achieve much more ambitious emissions targets than have been currently promised.
Another thing is sometimes the client is not really on board with doing better things, but you can partner with a local council to be a bit more sort of challenging with what they expect. So it's really trying to understand the whole system and where can we actually, what's the best way to make a difference.
Any other questions out there? Okay. Tell me about designing with country, and how does that change your processes of design? How does it mean a slower process, or does it just mean more time at the beginning? What about seeking permissions? How is it looking in your practices?
I can have a go. So we're just starting out on this as part of our Reconciliation Action Plan sort of deliverables and milestones. We've formed a couple of really good relationships with Indigenous consultants who are acting, I guess, as a facilitator to build the relationships with relevant land councils, but are also co-designing with some of our architects in our studios. And the bit that I think has been difficult is that it is a slightly different process for us in the way that the design comes into being. And certainly it's something that we're learning at the moment, and we've actually just been pulled up on something, speaking very frankly. My MD sat in the audience, so he's probably going to kill me. But I think being put in those uncomfortable positions where you're, as an architect, are designing sort of on your own as opposed to with, and I think that's a key learning, and yes, you need time to co-design. It's really important.
But isn't co-design and co-creation, you're always going to get a result that you're not in total control of?
Exactly.
And I think that's something for architects to really get their heads around, that we can't know and be in control, because hopefully there'll be a better outcome.
Which can be very uncomfortable, but then very
Clients,
developmental for
and
the
clients
architects.
might find that tricky, but
Yeah.
Lucky that in our practice we've got 4 Indigenous architects, so it's the highest number of Indigenous architects in Australia. So they have developed our Designing with Country framework, and they're the ones guiding the process on projects. It is much slower, as you said, and it is guided by Indigenous communities. So it depends on the type of project. Sometimes it's not possible to engage Indigenous communities on every single project, just because they don't have time, like for every tiny one, but at least we've got our group in the office that brings their own Indigenous perspective.
I'll just quickly add, it should be a lot slower, and currently it's not probably changed the process like it should. And we work, as I mentioned, on the first building at Waitemata with Danielle Hombre from Dinjama, and she always complains to me that there's not enough time to do a proper reading of country, engage with elders. So yeah, it's an interesting challenge actually, because our current processes don't probably allow the time that it should.
crazy, isn't it, when you're building stuff for hundreds of years? So unless there's burning questions out there, I can keep going. Any burning questions? Yep.
I just want to ask about the designing the disassembly, like how that, at the end of the life cycle, are the architects still responsible for the materials, and like how do you foresight the end of it?
I can start by answering that, because it was one of the kind of things that I talked about in that project. I think this is going to be a topic that we're going to see more and more of, and it's going to become more and more important, that we're thinking about what happens at the end of the building's life. And it goes back to regenerative design that Valerie talked about. So in that particular building, we designed it as a modular building and all the components could be pulled apart, disassembled, recycled, or indeed reassembled somewhere else in the city. So it comes back to the sort of materials that you choose, how it is fabricated, but also, put together so you can enable that. And it's about reducing waste, essentially. So I think this is going to become a really important topic that I think as architects we haven't tackled seriously enough to date, actually.
So does the person who owns the building, do they own the materials at the end of the day? Like, or does the architect sort of...
In this case, the owner of the building would own the materials, yes.
There is talk of digital passports for materials, so that there'll be an understanding of a whole lot of stuff around them that will go with them, which which I think is a whole new world we all need to understand, or someone needs to understand. And I think that kind of leads to another question I had please interrupt me if I don't. How are your other consultants that you're working with and the builders you're working with, how are they coming on this journey? You bringing them along? Are they bounding ahead? Are they sort of excited? You can start.
Yeah, I'll start. I think again it varies, to be quite honest with you. I think, as I said, engineers to date have taken a lot of leadership in this space. So I think they certainly are absolutely coming on the journey. In terms of builders and clients, again, I think that varies. In my experience, where the architect really leads and advocates and puts a very compelling idea forward and takes those people on the journey, they really buy into it. That's where I've seen the most success.
Similar response, it really varies. And if you do manage to get them all excited, which does happen, then really magic happens, and happens really fast. So it's about how do you talk to them to get them excited, and how do you bring them on board? You may want to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what you were saying about will and energy and really lifting conversations right from the very beginning before the project's even a project. Certainly there are some that we work very closely with who have similar passions to us and that we get to work on exciting projects with. But as you said, it totally depends on where the practices are up to. One thing that I think both of you touched on, Liz and Valerie, is really around the importance of integrated project design and project delivery. And it's certainly something that we're presenting to clients more and more, is actually this is a systemic issue. It needs to be solved systemically. All of the things that we're talking about, water, materials, all of the flows throughout a site, it's important that we have all of the disciplines actually solving these problems together in the room up front. And I think that's a really key thing for our sector moving forwards, is actually that integrated design process.
I think it really is about building the system that can deliver this, and sort of building the capacity of the whole system. And then if people don't want to come along, maybe have the no-go conversations with them at some point. But
the SEB, the new SEB, because we had a few regenerative practitioners involved in developing that, actually that had that embedded into it.
That will come back. Now, just any questions, please come through. But the other question I've got is, there's a whole bunch of young people who are smart enough to come along here tonight. What advice would you give them about what should they be concentrating on learning or looking for as they're studying, so that they can be really great contributors in practice when they leave?
That's a great one. I got to think. I would say to you all to try and tap into whatever brings you the most joy in your design, with and through the lens of being a conscious, responsible citizen in this world who wants to contribute towards a thriving future, and work with that.
I would second that. So there's so many different things that we need to look into when trying to achieve a better future for us all. So it's all about what do you actually care about? Where do you think you could make an impact? What makes you different to your friend next to you? And where do you think you can make the most difference? And just go for that. Yeah.
Better be careful what I say, because I've got some Hassell students here. I would say two things. First, be inquisitive, and I think being here tonight is part of that. But really, thinking about what you're doing, exploring ideas and really pushing that forward. The second one, which I touched on actually in the presentation, was not waiting for others to kind of do it for you. Like it's up to all of us at all levels of the organisation to push it forward. So yeah, that's I guess the two kind of things that I would kind of leave you with.
And I would say really look into regenerative design principles, because I think that is absolutely the future and will enable you to find the joy and express it beautifully, but also bring those sort of thinking skills and ways of being, doing and knowing into a practice is really important. But in the meantime, I'd get some really good skills on embodied carbon and sort of modelling, so that you can come in and help creatively resolve those tricky details, because there is an incredible illiteracy in a number of things like embodied carbon in the industry that and people in practice of going, how on earth am I going to learn how to do that? So I think there are some certain things like that where if you're young and enthusiastic, it might not be where you ultimately want to go, but gosh, it's helpful right now. Hang on, I think.
I was just going to say, similarly, really, Embodied Carbon is round the corner. Part Z will be coming out in the UK, I'm sure, very soon. And I think architects stand in such a great position to maximise this, also as a revenue stream, as a way of winning work, as a way of having those conversations with clients, because the tools are there, so we can do it.
And a big part of that is working out how to cleverly reuse existing buildings.
Absolutely.
Not big, starry, shiny new things. Okay. Yes, young man in the front. Can you explain what MECLA is? Because not everyone in the room knows.
MECLA is the Materials Embodied Carbon Leaders Alliance. It's just formed just over a year ago. Some seed funding from the New South Wales government. Different working groups looking at different things, from how we measure things, how we define things, and then certain working groups on concrete, steel, aluminium, services, all sorts of other things. And somehow I kind of landed chairing role for the aluminium group. But it's been really interesting. As an architect, we kind of sit in this ecosystem of builders, developers, in aluminium's case, miners, smelters, extrusion people, facade engineers, and we all have a role to play in understanding it. And, you know, to be honest, the conversation around aluminium is a lot less known than the other primary materials. And it's only when you start to bring those different parts of the system together and realize, oh, you know, at the scale that we operate with large buildings, most of those facades get made in China. How do we address that? That's a much bigger problem. Even terracotta, you know, a lot of things we make or that we use in our buildings aren't made anymore. So big, complex kind of problems. But yeah, architects are really well positioned to kind of facilitate those conversations and connect the dots.
And creatively guide them. You know, I think we actually are in one of the best professions in the world at this time, because we've been so lazy in the past. There's so much opportunity, and we have really great creative skills to kind of work out how to do really fun, good things in finding ways with all of our people around us, with the ecosystems we work in, but to find the excitement and will to creatively resolve this, because it's so important. We have to. Okay, I think we're kind of getting towards the end of it. Any more questions out there, or comments, or observations? Terror? Excitement? Great. Okay, we might just finish the evening with one final little sort of word of wisdom or observation, or just something to say goodbye.
Okay. Sorry, I'm quite loud. I would say probably just don't be afraid of getting started and getting stuck in. I think it's Jason McClellan uses the half-baked analogy. Just get it out there, start doing things, start working differently, and yeah, it's what we need now.
Just do it. It's
probably similar, but I loved what you said, Caroline, about, you know, we've been so lazy and now this is an incredible moment of opportunity. So harness that opportunity. Yeah, I think it's, you know, a really important time for us. As I said, you know, we're at crossroads, so.
And I will end by just saying every single person in this room has a huge amount of agency that you can step into and use. And do not underestimate how a conversation, a question, an enthusiasm for something, how much that can change the course of the future. So just be aware that you have agency. We are some of the most amazingly privileged people in the world, and we have got the responsibility of and the excitement of being able to do some really great stuff. So go out there and do good things, guys and girls. And thank you very much, Claire, Valerie and Liz, and thank you very much for all coming out on this cold night in Sydney.